It was supposed to be the biggest game of the season, a packed high school stadium under Friday night lights. But when the power flickered for just over a minute, 8 kids sitting together in row C vanished without a sound. No screams, no signs of struggle, just 8 empty seats, and one blood-streaked program left behind. 30 years later, a hidden staircase is discovered beneath the bleachers. And what lies below is something no one was meant to find. What really happened to the missing children of Echo Valley High? If you're into cinematic true crime stories based on real-life disappearances and buried secrets, subscribe now. October 14th, 1994. Location: Echo Valley, Pennsylvania. Echo Valley High School football field. The lights blinked just once, a stutter in the darkness like a held breath. Then they went out completely. Gasps rippled through the packed stadium. The announcer's microphone cut out mid-sentence. Cheers turned to murmurs. For exactly 72 seconds, the night held its breath. Then the floodlights came back on. The marching band resumed its off-key warm-up. Coaches barked orders, players stretched, vendors hustled to refill nacho trays and candy boxes. But near the center of the east bleachers, row C, seats 9 through 16, 8 children were gone. Not a scream, not a sound. Just 8 vacant spots. One open bag of popcorn, a pair of abandoned sneakers. A school program folded into quarters with the names of all 8 children circled in red ink, and one faint blood smear across the margin. No one saw them leave. No one remembered them screaming. And when the stadium was evacuated, search dogs brought in, and news vans descended the next morning, there were still no answers. They would become known as the Sideline 8. And for 3 decades, the case would remain one of Pennsylvania's most disturbing mysteries, until the ground cracked open beneath the bleachers, and hell itself answered. October 12th, 2024. Location: Echo Valley, Pennsylvania. Echo Valley High School football field. The rain had finally stopped, but the mud beneath the visitor bleachers still sucked at Cade Merritt's boots like it wanted to pull him under. He crouched down beside the rusted support beam and tugged on the loose aluminum panel with both hands. It groaned in protest, like it hadn't been disturbed in years. Behind him, the old stadium buzzed with a hum of floodlight repairs. One of the crewmen swore loudly as a socket wrench slipped from his hand and bounced off the scaffolding. "Yo, Cade," someone called from above. "You find that electrical junction yet?" Cade wiped a streak of dirt across his jaw, squinting at the narrow space behind the beam. "Almost. There's a weird hollow spot down here. Might be something behind the wall." He jammed his screwdriver under the panel's edge and pried it open. The metal screeched. Something inside gave way. Not wire, not conduit. It sounded like timber cracking. Then he felt it. A puff of cold air on his wrist. He paused. The air was wrong. Not just cold, but stale, like something trapped for years. Cade yanked his flashlight from his belt and clicked it on. Beyond the panel, a gap had formed. Not part of any blueprint he'd seen. Just past the support column was a rectangular cut in the concrete, maybe 4 feet tall and 3 wide. A faint draft spilled from within. Dust motes swirled in the beam of light like ash, and behind the dust, a staircase descended into the earth. Concrete, cracked, water-stained, unmarked. He leaned in, not quite crossing the threshold. A deep silence pulsed out from the opening. Cade swallowed. He'd grown up in Echo Valley. He'd heard the stories, the kids, the night the lights went out. 8 children, gone without a sound. And now this. Cade stood up fast, heart thudding. "You guys need to see this," he called up toward the scaffolding. "Now." Later that day, Echo Valley police cordoned off the east bleacher section with caution tape. Detective Naomi Vega stood just outside the barrier, arms folded tight against her chest. The wind pulled strands of dark hair from her ponytail and swept them across her jaw. The stairs Cade found weren't on any building plan. Not from 1994. Not from the 2008 renovation. She'd already had the county archive pull every permit filed in the last 50 years. Nothing. Vega glanced toward the makeshift command tent where Cade sat wrapped in a blanket, sipping coffee like it might help him forget what he'd seen. She turned to Officer Melanie Grant, her partner of 5 years. Any word from forensics? Still inside, sending a probe camera down now. Grant's jaw tightened. You think this has anything to do with the 8? Naomi didn't answer right away. She watched the engineers feed cable into the hole beneath the bleachers, slowly guiding the camera down the steps. Then the feed flickered onto the tablet screen. The stairs descended for at least 20 feet. At the bottom, a narrow corridor. Walls lined with what looked like burlap and pink insulation. Childlike paintings adorned the surface. Stick figures, footballs, a smiling sun. But the paint was dark, not red, not black, brown. Naomi's voice was quiet. Get CSU down here now. By nightfall, word had already begun to spread. It started with a post on a local Facebook group. Emergency crews under the Echo Valley High bleachers. Unconfirmed discovery. Police on site. Then someone else uploaded a photo. Yellow tape, flashing lights, a stretcher wheeled out with something covered in black plastic. It wasn't a body, just a box, but the shape was enough to set off rumors. Inside the police tent, Naomi stared at the contents of that box. There were 8 jackets, red and white windbreakers, each embroidered with a first name, each tagged with a number, each perfectly folded, and beneath them, an aged Polaroid. The children sat in a row, shoulder to shoulder, their faces young and hopeful. One boy wore face paint from the homecoming pep rally. One girl clutched a caramel apple still wrapped in plastic. The background showed the very bleachers Cade had been working under. Written on the back in faded pencil, Echo Valley 8. Last practice. October 14th, 1994. Naomi's fingers trembled. She was 12 when the sideline 8 vanished. Her little brother had begged to go to the game that night, but their mother said no. A stomach flu had kept them both home. She hadn't let herself think about it in years. Now she couldn't stop. By the end of the week, cadaver dogs hit on a secondary scent trail deeper beneath the bleachers. Another concrete slab, another sealed chamber. This one contained something far worse. A chalkboard, crude furniture, a child-sized desk stained dark with something long dried. And in the center of the floor, a crude symbol painted in concentric circles burned into the concrete. Detective Vega stood over the scene, her gloved hands clenched into fists. Someone had built a school beneath a football field, not for education, but for indoctrination. October 13th, 2024. Location, Echo Valley, Pennsylvania. Echo Valley Police Department. The jacket Naomi Vega held in her hands was too small for any living child. Red nylon, faded to rust. White piping around the shoulders. A broken zipper. The name stitched across the chest in thread that hadn't frayed despite the years. Tyler. No last name, just that. It was enough. Naomi turned the jacket over in her hands as if touching it could bring back a memory she hadn't known she still carried. She remembered the posters from 1994. 8 children, boys and girls from different grades, different families, all sitting together that night. Tyler had been the youngest. 8 years old, brown hair, missing 2 front teeth. He'd worn his older brother's oversized hoodie to the game, and according to every witness statement, he was the one holding the group's popcorn tub. Now his name was all that remained, stitched on a jacket buried beneath the field where he vanished. Naomi closed the evidence bag and sealed it. She handed it gently to Officer Grant. Label it. Tag it for fast-track forensic testing. I want fiber analysis, blood presence, everything. Grant nodded, her eyes locked on the rest of the jackets. You think we'll find all 8? I think we already did, Naomi said. What I want to know is why they were preserved like this. Why buried together? They both turned toward the Polaroid, now displayed under protective glass on the evidence board. The 8 children looked directly at the camera. None smiled. Later that afternoon, the makeshift field lab buzzed with quiet intensity. Naomi stood with the county forensic pathologist, Dr. Ravi Mehra, just outside the chamber, unearthed beneath the bleachers. The interior had been swept and photographed, measured and logged. What they'd found defied anything resembling a rational explanation. "It's a classroom," Mehra said, disbelief coating his words. "Or someone's idea of one." Naomi stared at the objects retrieved from inside. Child-sized desks arranged in a circle, each bolted to the floor. A cracked chalkboard listing 4 words again and again in shaky block letters. Obey, trust, belong, ascend. A small cabinet held aged notebooks filled with childish handwriting. Each page contained the same phrases repeated hundreds of times. I belong to the circle. Ascension means love. Pain teaches. Pain purifies. Some pages included drawings, stick figures with blindfolds, a sun with a face and jagged teeth, a man with antlers standing behind the children. Naomi didn't speak for a long moment. Then, what about the residue on the floor? Mehra exhaled through his nose. Not blood, technically, at least not human. Early tests show animal plasma, possibly goat. Naomi's stomach turned. Like ritualistic. Looks that way. By the next morning, national media had caught wind. Naomi's phone buzzed non-stop. CNN.WZTR in Philadelphia. Even Cold Truth, that viral true crime podcast, had sent an inquiry. But she didn't care about headlines. She cared about the names. She opened the 1994 case file again. All 8. Tyler Mann, 8th. Casey Bramwell, 10th. Emma Grace Latimer, 9th. Jaden Santos, 11th. Micah and Megan McElroy, 12th, twins. Harper Voss, 9. Dylan Reed, 10. They'd been seated together. Not all friends. Some had just ended up next to each other by random chance. Tickets passed down from older siblings. A last-minute switch. A coincidence. Or maybe not. Naomi tapped the edge of the case folder. Grant, pull enrollment records from that year. Family histories, parent occupations. I want patterns. Grant raised an eyebrow. You think they were targeted? I don't think this was random, Naomi said. And if I'm right, someone picked these kids for a reason. Elsewhere in town, a woman named Elise Voss sat frozen at her kitchen table, the morning paper trembling in her hands. She hadn't seen her daughter's name printed in 29 years. Harper Voss still missing. Harper had been 9 when she vanished. Elise remembered everything. The way her daughter had begged for extra ketchup on her fries at the stadium. The new braid she'd worn that night. How her red jacket was too thin for the chill in the air. When the lights went out, Elise had been in the concession line. And then Harper was gone. Now the news said they'd found jackets, buried under the very bleachers where she disappeared. And Harper's name was one of them. Elise's hands shook as she reached for the phone. She hadn't spoken to the police in over a decade. She'd given up hope years ago. But now, something had changed. Back at Echo Valley PD, Naomi sat across from Elise an hour later. The woman looked older than her 60 years, brittle somehow, like glass worn thin by waves. I didn't want to come, Elise said softly. I didn't think I had the strength. But I saw the jacket in the paper. You think it's hers? Naomi chose her words carefully. We believe it is. The embroidery matches the style of jackets handed out during homecoming week. She never came home, Elise whispered, voice catching. And neither did I. Naomi leaned forward. Mrs. Voss, we need your help. Do you remember anything unusual about that week? Anyone new around town? Any changes in Harper's behavior? Elise stared past her for a long time. Then, there was a substitute teacher at Echo Valley Elementary, Mr. Mallory. Kind eyes, soft-spoken. He taught Harper's class for about 2 weeks before the game. Naomi's pulse picked up. Do you remember his first name? No, Elise hesitated, but Harper called him Mr. Mal. Later that evening, Naomi dug through archived employment records. Echo Valley Elementary, fall of 1994. She found no mention of a Mr. Mallory, but she found a payroll stub from October that year paid to a substitute temp ID, MAL-13. No first name, no address, just a check number marked as paid, and a routing number to a now-defunct local credit union. Grant leaned over her shoulder. So he was off the grid? Or someone helped erase him? Naomi stared at the screen. Beneath the bleachers, they'd found children's desks arranged in a circle. A cult. A teacher. A symbol burned into concrete. And now a man whose name had been forgotten by everyone, except a mother who never stopped remembering. Naomi whispered the name aloud. Mr. Mal. Then she opened a new file on her desktop and typed one word across the top. Suspect. October 14th, 2024. Location: Echo Valley, Pennsylvania. McElroy residence. The attic smelled like cedar and damp paper, just as Micah McElroy's mother remembered. She hadn't been up here in years, not since they moved out of the old farmhouse after the twins disappeared. The house had sold last spring, but she couldn't bring herself to clear out the attic until now, not after the news reports, not after they found the jackets. Micah and Megan, 12 years old. She'd kissed both of them on the forehead before they left for the big homecoming game. She'd stayed home with a migraine, told their older cousin Jeremy to keep an eye on them. He said he had, until the lights went out. The police had found nothing, no trace, just an empty spot in the stands and a half-eaten hot dog beneath one of the seats. Now she stepped carefully between boxes of Christmas ornaments and old VHS tapes, pushing aside a plastic tub labeled Winter Clothes 1993. At the back, wedged beneath a disintegrating folding chair, sat a black duffel bag she didn't recognize. She pulled it free. It was heavier than she expected. Unzipping it released a smell like metal and dust. Inside, she found a stack of notebooks bound together with a leather strap, each cover marked with a number. Session 3, Session 4, Session 7. Underneath lay something she couldn't explain. A paper mask, roughly cut, painted with a long face and wide hollow eyes, and antlers. Meanwhile, at the Echo Valley Police Department, Naomi Vega's mind turned over the old cult-like imagery again and again. Obey, trust, belong, ascend. Ascension means love. Pain teaches, pain purifies. The phrase princess room had haunted one of her older cases, but this was something else. A different structure, different philosophy, possibly a different group, or a splinter. The Polaroid of the 8 missing kids sat at the center of her evidence board, now digitally enhanced. Grant entered the room holding a large envelope. We've got something. Naomi looked up sharply. What is it? Microfilm archive. Yearbooks, staff IDs. Grant pulled out a page with a blown-up photo of the Echo Valley Elementary Halloween parade. It showed a row of children walking through the gym in costume. Superheroes, princesses, a cowboy. Behind them, a man stood with his hands clasped. Balding, glasses, tall. Watching the children closely. The costume was unmistakable. Painted antlers, hollow eyes, the same as the mask in the duffel bag. Naomi's voice dropped to a whisper. Mr. Mal. She took the photo and stepped closer to the board, pinning it beside the jackets, the Polaroid, and the chalkboard writing. They had a face. Now they needed a name. That night, Detective Vega visited the last known address of Jeremy Cross, cousin of the McElroy twins and the only family member physically present when the 8 children vanished. He answered the door in flannel and worn jeans, his beard thick and unkempt. His eyes were sunken, His jaw jittered like it hadn't stopped moving in a decade. "Detective Vega," he said, squinting. "I figured someone had come after the news. Took you long enough." Naomi kept her tone calm. "Mind if I come in?" He stepped aside. "Not at all." Inside, the house was dim. Drawn curtains, old newspapers, the hum of a refrigerator that sounded near death. Jeremy gestured to a stained recliner. "That night's been playing in my head for 30 years. Tell me everything you remember." Jeremy sat across from her, bouncing his knee. "I had all 8 kids with me. They wanted to sit together. Said they'd meet me at the concession stand at halftime. Then the lights went out. 72 seconds. When they came back, the row was empty." He swallowed hard. But that wasn't the first time they saw him. Naomi stilled. "Who?" "The man with the antlers." Jeremy's voice dropped, almost reverent. "Micah talked about him all week. Said he watched their practice from the woods behind the field. Waved at them. Stood perfectly still, like a statue. Always wore that mask." Naomi's pulse quickened. "Why didn't you say anything back then?" "Because I thought they were playing a game." Jeremy looked up at her with bloodshot eyes, until the night after they vanished, when someone left a cassette on my front porch. He reached beneath the couch and pulled out a cracked plastic case. I kept it. I don't know why. Maybe part of me knew one day someone would come looking. At the station, the tech team carefully digitized the tape. Naomi sat with Grant and 2 CSU agents as the footage flickered onto the screen. Static first, then sound. Children's voices. Laughter, a camera jerking through trees and brush. Then it focused. 8 kids stood in a circle, all smiling. In the center stood the antlered man. His voice came softly, almost lullaby-like. "Are you ready to ascend?" The children nodded. He raised both arms, and the screen went black. Elsewhere, in a retirement facility 2 counties away, an elderly man stared at his TV, trembling. He reached for a dusty photo album and flipped to a staff picture from Echo Valley Elementary. There, standing behind a line of second graders, was the same man with the hollow eyes. The old man picked up the phone with shaking hands. "I need to report something," he told the 911 operator. "I think I knew the man from the bleachers. The one with the antlers." October 15th, 2024. Location, Echo Valley, Pennsylvania. Echo Valley Retirement Village. The man who made the call identified himself as Franklin Ellerby, age 82, former custodian at Echo Valley Elementary, retired in 1997. Detective Naomi Vega arrived just after dawn. She found him seated in a day room flooded with early light, the television muted, a coffee cup trembling in his hand. Franklin looked up as she approached. "You're here about Mr. Mallory," he said without prompting. Naomi sat beside him. "That name came up in our investigation, yes. You knew him?" He gave a slow, haunted nod. "Everyone called him Mr. Mal. He wasn't on payroll exactly. One of those substitute contractors. Said he was part of a pilot program. Private funding, clean background, calm with the kids. But something about him always gave me the chills." "What do you remember most?" Franklin didn't blink. He watched the children too closely, especially at recess. Never touched him, but you could tell he was waiting for something. Naomi leaned forward. "You saw him in costume, didn't you?" Franklin's eyes filled with tears. "Halloween parade, 1994. All the teachers wore costumes, but his wasn't funny. Long paper mask, painted white with antlers. Said he was a forest spirit. Said the kids called him the Watcher of the Circle." Naomi felt her stomach twist. Franklin swallowed hard. "I was cleaning the gym that week after hours. Heard chanting once, kids' voices. Thought it was just after school practice, but when I opened the door, he was in there with 6 or 7 students, all sitting cross-legged in a circle. He had that mask on, was talking about ascension and cleansing fear." "You reported it?" I tried. Principal said Mr. Mal had special clearance, that his methods were developmental. Social bonding therapy, they called it. Said I was being dramatic. Naomi's hands balled into fists. And when the kids vanished 2 days later, Franklin's voice broke. I quit that same week. Back at the station, Naomi brought the news to Grant in the cold case unit. Mr. Mal was never vetted, slipped through under the radar. His entire employment was facilitated by someone high up, someone local. Grant frowned. You think the school board was in on it? Maybe not all, but someone let him in. Protected him. This wasn't one man acting alone. She pinned Franklin's old yearbook photo to the timeline. Then, with a new red string, connected it to a name she hadn't considered before. Arthur Delaney, superintendent of Echo Valley Schools, 1989 to 1995. Delaney retired abruptly after the disappearances, claimed health reasons, moved to rural Maine. Naomi tapped the photograph with a pencil. I want a welfare check on him, and pull everything from the old board minutes. If Mr. Mal was approved through an alternative education channel, the trail starts with Delaney. Grant looked up. What about the tapes we pulled from under the bleachers? Naomi inhaled. Let's watch one. That afternoon, in a secure media room, Naomi and 2 CSU techs queued up one of the VHS tapes from the hidden chamber. The label read, Session 1. Ascension begins. The footage began grainy, time-stamped October 7th, 1994. A dark room, concrete floor, a line of desks in a circle. The camera panned slowly across each child. Naomi recognized some immediately. Tyler Mann, Casey Bramwell, Emma Grace Latimer, all seated, silent, staring straight ahead. Then the camera turned. And there he was. The man with the antlers. His voice was a soft hum beneath the static. Children of the circle, you have been chosen. You will unlearn fear. You will unlearn the lie of loneliness. You are not 8, you are one mind, one purpose. He approached each child and placed his hand on their heads. You belong to the circle. Say it. The children spoke in unison. I belong to the circle. He nodded. Ascension begins now. The screen cut to static. Naomi's hands trembled as she hit pause. Grant whispered, They were brainwashing them. No, Naomi said. They were preparing them for something. Meanwhile, Elise Voss stared out her window at a street that looked unchanged in 30 years. But something had shifted deep inside her. She couldn't stop thinking about the old photos. Not the school portraits or the family vacation ones, but one in particular. A group shot taken at a summer camp in 1993. Harper had circled one of the counselors in ink, drawn tiny antlers above his head. Elise hadn't understood it then. Now she did. She found the photo in a shoebox in her closet, and her fingers trembled as she picked up the phone. The next day, Naomi received Elise's call. He was there before the school, at the camp, Camp Marigold. Naomi stared at the print Elise had scanned and sent. There he was again. The same man. No mask this time. Just that same hollow smile, hand on the shoulder of a small girl. Harper. Naomi called Grant immediately. Get me the records for Camp Marigold, staff lists, cabin assignments, anything. On it, Grant said. And by the way, Delaney, the old superintendent? He died in 1998. Heart attack. But guess who delivered the eulogy? Who? Grant's voice dropped. Reverend Colby Ames, local pastor, currently resides 3 blocks from the high school. That evening, Naomi knocked on the Reverend's door. Colby Ames answered in a sweater and slacks, balding, calm-eyed. He invited her in like he'd been expecting company. I knew this day would come, he said. Naomi's breath caught. Why? Because the circle never died, Ames said, smiling faintly. It just went underground. Naomi reached for her badge. You're under arrest. Ames raised his hands. I'm not running. I've already ascended. Naomi cuffed him, heart pounding, and whispered to herself, "This isn't over." October 16th, 2024 session. Echo Valley Police Department. Interrogation Room 2. Detective Naomi Vega sat in the steel chair across from Reverend Colby Ames. His hands were cuffed in front of him, but his expression remained peaceful, like a man who'd finally found relief. There was no trace of panic in his posture, no stammering, no denial, only serenity. Naomi pushed the recorder across the table and clicked it on. The soft beep filled the silence. "State your name for the record." "Reverend Colby James Ames." "Reverend?" "I was ordained in 1992, he said, almost proudly. "Independent ministry. We weren't affiliated with the mainstream denominations." Naomi folded her hands. "We know you delivered the eulogy at Arthur Delaney's funeral." "Yes, Arthur was a friend, a mentor." "And did he know about the circle?" Colby smiled faintly. "Arthur helped us build it." Naomi's stomach turned. "Helped you build what? The structure beneath the bleachers?" The idea of the circle." Colby leaned forward. "The structure was physical, temporary, but the circle is forever. It lives through obedience, through sacrifice, through unity." Naomi's voice stayed steady. "And through 8 missing children." Colby's eyes gleamed. They weren't missing. They were chosen. In the tech room, Officer Grant watched from behind the one-way glass, flanked by 2 federal agents who had arrived that morning after forensic reports hit the database. They hadn't found bodies beneath the bleachers, but they'd found something else. Teeth. Small ones, 8 in total, 1 from each child. Extracted post-mortem, cleanly, carefully. Souvenirs, tokens. Or perhaps, as the circle's teaching suggested, tithes. Grant's jaw clenched as she relayed the findings over comms to Naomi. Naomi didn't flinch when the update came through. She simply turned back to Ames. "Where are the bodies?" Ames blinked. "Bodies?" Naomi leaned forward. "Don't play stupid. 8 children went missing the night the lights went out. You built a ritual space beneath the bleachers. You had them repeat indoctrination phrases. You led them into something, and now their teeth are all that's left. So I'll ask again, where are the bodies?" For the first time, Ames hesitated. Not all of them died. Later that afternoon, Grant pulled up a document recovered from Reverend Ames' study. It was a weathered leather-bound book, part diary, part manifesto. Across the cover, in stamped gold lettering, "The Circle's Book. Volume 2, Ascension Requires Surrender." Inside were pages of handwritten notes, coded passages, and transcribed sessions. One stood out. Session 11, the final phase. 3 were chosen for renewal. 1 ascended prematurely. The others remain in the lower corridor. Their bodies are in transition. Their minds belong to the circle. When the Watcher returns, they will awaken. Naomi stared at the phrasing. "Transition?" she said aloud. "What the hell does that mean?" Grant handed her another scan. "You'll want to see this too." It was a map, rough, hand-drawn. A floor plan of the structure beneath the bleachers, but in the far corner, marked in red ink, was a doorway Naomi hadn't seen. "Lower corridor, sealed after Session 12. That evening, they returned to the field. Floodlights bathed the exposed chamber beneath the bleachers in stark white. Teams in hazmat suits combed the area, already cataloging evidence. Ritual objects, fingerprints, blood samples, and symbols etched into the walls. Naomi stood beside the structure with CSU lead tech Marcus Young. "You see this?" he said, gesturing toward a partially buried slab of concrete. "There's something under this. The ground's been artificially packed. Rebar's been cut and bent to seal this entire section. How big? Could be another full room." They brought in a backhoe, worked carefully, and by 9:30 p.m., a hidden door had been uncovered. This one was heavier, reinforced, steel bolts across the edges. Naomi crouched beside it. The metal was rusted, but the frame was clean, as if someone had oiled the hinges from the inside. There was no handle, just a small square slot, no wider than a book spine. She turned to Young. "We need to get this open, now." Back at the station, Grant continued analyzing Ames' diary. One passage stopped her cold. "The false sun must be extinguished. Real light comes from within. At the time of the final gathering, the mask must be worn, the prayer spoken, and the gift of flesh offered." She flipped ahead to a folded page sealed with tape. Carefully peeling it open, she found a Polaroid. One she hadn't seen before. Not the missing children, not the man in the mask, but a teenager. Older, pale, hair too long, eyes blank, sitting in a room with pink walls. The timestamp, September 2nd, 2024. Grant's voice dropped. "Naomi, one of the kids might still be alive." Back on site, the steel door groaned as the crowbar gave way. The room beyond was pitch black. Officers aimed flashlights inside. The space smelled of mold, metal, and something sterile, like a hospital, and something else. Life. Naomi stepped inside slowly, hand on her sidearm. The room stretched into a narrow corridor lined with bunk beds, each bolted to the wall, each with neatly folded blankets. The walls were painted pink and blue. A shelf in the corner held books, dolls, a mirror. Then came the sound, a low groan. Human. Naomi turned her light toward the far wall. A figure sat in the corner, legs crossed, thin, wearing a shirt 2 sizes too small, face pale from lack of sunlight, hair hanging to the jaw. He looked up at her and spoke. "Is it time for session 13? Naomi froze. "My name is Detective Naomi Vega," she said slowly. "You're safe now. What's your name?" The boy tilted his head. "I used to be Dylan," he whispered. "But they gave me a new name." Naomi's voice cracked. "Dylan Reed." He blinked, then nodded. October 17th, 2024. Location: Echo Valley Regional Hospital. Secure Wing, Room 3. C. The boy in the bed didn't blink much. His name was Dylan Reed. At least it used to be. He'd been missing for 30 years, one of the 8 children who vanished from Echo Valley High during the homecoming game in 1994. Now 16 pounds underweight and unable to tolerate sunlight for more than 20 minutes, Dylan sat beneath a pale blanket in a sterile hospital room, his eyes fixated on the far wall, as if trying to decipher a language only he could hear. Naomi Vega stood at the doorway, watching through the observation window as child psychiatrist Dr. Marion Ebbing tried once more to speak to him. "Dylan," Dr. Ebbing said softly, "do you know where you are?" The boy turned his head slowly. "This is outside," he murmured. "They said we weren't ready." Naomi's chest tightened. His voice was hollow, monotone, almost rehearsed. "How long were you down there?" Dr. Ebbing asked. Dylan blinked. "We stopped counting after session 50. The sun never came. That meant we were still ascending. Do you remember the others? The children who were with you?" Dylan flinched. His fingers curled into the blanket. "Micah tried to run. Megan wouldn't let him. They made her wear the crown." "What crown?" Dylan turned his head toward the ceiling. "The one with the hooks." Naomi backed away from the glass. Downstairs, Officer Grant met her with a grim expression and a stack of files. "We found another room behind the corridor," she said. "Sealed with cement. Took 4 hours to break through." Naomi followed her to the evidence lab. Laid out on the table were a makeshift dental chair bolted to the floor, restraints worn down by years of use, a pair of rusted forceps, and a jar labeled offerings. Inside the jar, 7 children's teeth. Grant said nothing. Naomi stared at the instruments, bile rising in her throat. He extracted them himself, for some kind of ritual. That's not all. Grant passed her a plastic evidence sleeve. Inside was a slip of old, stained paper. On it, in a child's handwriting, "The Watcher lives through us. The crown makes us see. Do not scream during session 13. Naomi read it twice, then again, and finally whispered, "What the hell happened down there?" Back at the station, CSU Tech Marcus Young handed Naomi a set of enhanced photographs from the chamber wall carvings. "These weren't just random scratches," he said. "They're a language, a symbolic code." Naomi scanned the images. Concentric circles, stick figures with eyes crossed out, rows of numbers, and a triangle with a vertical line down its center. "I had our linguist consultant run them through a symbol recognition engine," Marcus added. "A lot of overlap with fringe cult iconography, specifically a group from the 1980s known as the Ascendants." Naomi's eyes narrowed. "The ones from Vermont?" "Same ones. Ritual isolation, child grooming under the guise of spiritual development. Believed children had cleaner souls, more suitable for what they called ascended continuity." Naomi felt ice crawl down her spine. "They were thought to be disbanded after the raid in '89, or they just relocated." She returned to her desk, opened her laptop, and began cross-referencing. The Circle, The Watcher, Session 13, The Crown. Dylan's words, teeth as offerings. A pattern was forming, but not in a straight line. It spiraled, tightening around a central idea she couldn't yet define. That night, Dylan began to speak in his sleep. A nurse recorded him whispering phrases, "Don't look behind the mirror. If the light turns blue, kneel. He said I would come back wrong." She never screamed, not even when they pushed the pins in. Dr. Ebbing played the audio for Naomi the next morning. "He's fragmented," the doctor said. "Severe dissociation, decades of psychological trauma. But some of it sounds implanted, like phrases he was told to memorize." Naomi leaned against the wall, exhausted. "We need to find out what Session 13 was. If that's what broke them, maybe that's what killed the others." Elsewhere in town, Elise Voss sat at her dining room table with a box of old notebooks in front of her. She hadn't opened them in years. They were Harper's, the ones she left on the table before she disappeared. One caught her eye, scrawled on the cover in crayon, "Circle practice, homework." Elise opened it. Inside were rows of repeated sentences, written in Harper's neat third-grade handwriting. "Ascend and obey. The Watcher will come. 8 will become 1. But then a different message appeared, shakier, as if written in fear. "We're not supposed to tell. He wears other people's faces. I saw him without the mask. He has no eyes." Elise dropped the notebook. She picked up the phone and called Naomi. That evening, Naomi returned to the field one last time. The stairwell beneath the bleachers was now sealed off, secured by federal forensics and guarded 24/7. But Naomi stood at the top of the steps, staring into the darkness. Dylan Reed had survived. 7 others had not. One name still remained unaccounted for: Megan McElroy. No body, no teeth, nothing. Naomi's voice was low, quiet, spoken to herself. She wore the crown. Then she turned and walked back toward her cruiser. Tomorrow, she'd drive to Vermont, to a remote field where the Ascendants had once built their sanctuary. And she'd start asking about the children who were never found. October 18th, 2024. Location, Windham County, Vermont. Former Ascendant grounds. The sky over Windham County was low and gray when Naomi Vega arrived. The old Ascendant property sat on 30 secluded acres off a private road that had long since been overtaken by moss and pine needles. All that remained now were scattered stone foundations, broken fencing, and the rotting carcass of a meeting hall. Its roof collapsed inward like a rib cage. Naomi stepped out of her SUV and into the silence. The wind moved through the trees in soft gusts, and somewhere nearby, a crow called once and went still. According to the archived documents she'd pulled from federal storage, the Ascendants had operated here until their compound was raided in 1989 after multiple allegations of ritual abuse and child disappearance. But only a handful of members were ever arrested. The rest scattered. One name stood out in those files: Elijah Rowe, a founding member, never captured, believed dead, until his name appeared in Ames' Circle book under Session Oversight, Vermont Transfer. An hour later, Naomi met with a local librarian named Janice Cray, who had inherited the key to the locked records room inside the Wyndham Historical Society. Janice pulled down a weathered red book, spine broken, titled The Children of Antlers, Recollections from the Quiet Ones. Compiled from survivor statements, journal fragments, and artifacts recovered from the Vermont raid, it had never been publicly released. But one page drew Naomi's eye immediately. A child's drawing, dated 1988. Crayon, faded with time. 8 figures standing in a circle, all holding hands. In the center, a tall white figure with antlers and no face. Below it, scrawled in child's hand, "He said I was the crown. I said I was scared. He said that meant I was ready." Naomi's pulse pounded. She turned the page. A photograph, blurry, grainy, black and white. A young girl with dark hair, seated on a stone altar. Her face expressionless. Her hands folded neatly. In the corner, handwritten, Megan M. Back in Echo Valley, Dylan Reed sat alone in his hospital room, eyes on the mirror across from his bed. He hadn't spoken since the previous night. The doctors said it was a regression, a trauma response. But he wasn't regressing. He was waiting. The mirror shifted slightly on its hook, just enough to catch a sliver of movement behind it. He whispered, "Is it you?" And from somewhere deep within the walls, a voice replied, "Session 13 never ended, Dylan. We're just between cycles." That same night, Naomi returned to Echo Valley, carrying the Vermont book under her arm. She barely stepped through the station doors before Grant met her with a grim expression. "We have a problem." Naomi didn't speak. Grant handed her a security photo. It was taken just before sunrise. Outside Echo Valley High, a figure in a long coat, hood pulled low, walking toward the rear fence, clutched under their arm. A box labeled Circle Private Tapes. From the timestamp, it was only hours old. "Someone got in," Grant said, "and took something we hadn't cataloged yet." Naomi stared at the footage. The frame was blurry, but the person moved with strange precision, measured, unafraid. "Do we know who it is?" "No ID yet," Grant replied. "But CSU found something." She handed Naomi a forensic report. Partial footprint recovered near the fence. Size 6. Worn tread. Estimated weight, 110 pounds. Gait suggests female, possibly juvenile. Naomi lowered the report. Megan. Hours later, Naomi sat across from Dylan again. She showed him the picture from the Vermont book. The girl on the altar. "Is this her?" He nodded. She was always the strongest. They said she was the only one who could wear it for more than 5 minutes without passing out. "The crown." He nodded again. Naomi leaned in. Did she survive? Dylan's eyes narrowed, as if calculating how much truth to give. She didn't leave like the others. They let her stay. Why? Dylan's lips parted. Because she became one of them. At sunset, Echo Valley High sat silent and fenced off. But behind the visitor bleachers, beneath the panel where Cade Merritt had first uncovered the hidden staircase, something new had appeared. A Polaroid, taped to the outside of the panel. 8 children standing in a circle, but now a 9th stood behind them, her face turned away, wearing the antlered mask, and in red marker at the bottom, the words, Session 14, The Crown Returns. October 19th, 2024. Location, Echo Valley, Pennsylvania. Echo Valley High School, East Bleachers. The Polaroid was fresh, still warm when forensics retrieved it at 2:12 a.m., dew clinging to its corners. Naomi Vega stared at it under the harsh light of the evidence tent. The image was clear, too clear. This wasn't an old photo. It was taken with intention, modern, a message. 8 children stood in a circle. The original 8, all presumed dead. But in this new image, their clothes looked pristine, their expressions vacant, as if they were mannequins posed for some sinister reenactment. And behind them, unmistakable even in profile, a figure in the antlered mask. Megan. The red scrawl beneath the photo wasn't handwritten like a caption. It was deliberate, stylized. Session 14, The Crown Returns. Naomi closed her eyes and let the nausea pass. "Why now?" she muttered. "Why 30 years later?" Grant leaned over her shoulder. "We've got something from the lab. CSU enhanced the background. The image was taken here, under the field." "What?" "Same backdrop, same wall textures. Whoever took this photo is still using the space, or one built to look exactly like it." Naomi felt her chest tighten. Session 13 wasn't the end. It was an intermission. Meanwhile, in a second-floor motel room on the edge of town, Megan McElroy unwrapped a series of objects from a worn leather satchel. A faded circle workbook, a half-burned photograph of Micah, her twin brother, a set of old keys with numbers carved into their sides, and a crown. The object was horrific and intricate. Wooden latticework bound in copper wiring, with tiny hooks that arched downward like teeth. Dried blood still lined the interior. She ran her fingers over the crown with something between reverence and guilt. In the mirror, she caught her own reflection and flinched. Her face was thinner now, her jaw sharper, but her eyes had changed most. They weren't afraid anymore. They were empty. She whispered aloud, "I've come home." Back at Echo Valley PD, Naomi gathered every file, every photo, every log from the original 1994 investigation. There had to be something they missed, some connection between the circle, the school, and the survivors. Then, buried in a faded logbook, she found it. October 21st, 1994. Anonymous tip received regarding surviving child hidden inside fieldhouse. Officers responded. Nothing found. Report closed. The address matched Echo Valley High's East Fieldhouse. Naomi stood up fast. "Grant, get a team. We're going back to the fieldhouse." At the East Fieldhouse, the building looked like every other aging facility in town, bricked over in patches, the paint peeling from its cinder-block skin. They entered with floodlights and thermal scanners. Dust hung in thick curtains. The air was stale. Locker doors dangled open, rusting at their hinges. Then a CSU officer called out, "Back wall, we've got something." A section of paneling rang hollow. Behind it, an iron hatch. Naomi's breath caught as they pulled it open, revealing a concrete shaft leading down. No ladder, no stairs. Just a rope, frayed and weighted with age. "This isn't on any blueprint," Grant said. Naomi stared into the black void. Because it was never supposed to be found. Elsewhere, Megan descended into the circle's sanctum once again. The second chamber, unsealed and untouched for nearly 3 decades, had remained intact. Mold crept across the ceiling. The old chairs stood in a perfect ring. The chalkboard still bore Session 12's final message. The body must break before the spirit can leave. Megan walked past the altar and set the crown on its old pedestal. Then she unwrapped a photo and pinned it to the wall. Dylan Reed, taken through the hospital window. She lit 3 candles and whispered, "The Ascended One has returned. The Watcher sees. The circle reforms." From the darkness behind her came a voice. "You were always the strongest." She didn't turn. "I remember you," she said, "but you aren't him." The figure stepped forward, older now, stubble on his face, eyes haunted. Jeremy Cross, cousin of the twins, the last person to see them alive. Megan turned to face him. "I need you to help me finish what they started." Back in the shaft, Naomi and her team descended using harnesses. The air grew colder as they went. At the bottom, a tunnel, newly dug. They followed it for nearly 40 feet before emerging into a mirrored replica of the original chamber beneath the bleachers. But this one was unfinished. Wires hung exposed. Dolls lined the walls. In the center stood a single child's chair, facing a camera. Naomi moved toward it slowly. On the seat was another Polaroid. Dylan again. But this time, he was crying. Behind him stood the masked girl. And written across the bottom, "One survived, one remembers. Session 14 is for him." October 20th, 2024. Location, Echo Valley Regional Hospital. Secure wing, room 3. C. The nurse had just changed shifts when the screaming started. Dylan Reed had been silent for hours, catatonic almost. But at 4:17 a.m., the hallway echoed with a sound no one had heard from him yet. A scream so sharp and primal, it sliced through the quiet like broken glass. When Naomi Vega arrived 10 minutes later, he was curled in a fetal position beneath the hospital bed, nails bleeding, arms covered in defensive scratches. "He saw something," the nurse whispered, shaken. He kept repeating the same phrase over and over. Naomi crouched beside the bed. "Dylan, it's Naomi. You're safe." He stared past her, wide-eyed. "She came back," he whispered. "She came back and she wasn't her anymore." "Who?" His voice dropped to a whimper. "Megan." An hour later, Naomi and Grant reviewed the security camera footage from the overnight hallway. At 3:59 a.m., a figure appeared at the end of the corridor, walking calmly toward room 3C. She wore scrubs, a surgical mask, and a hospital ID badge that looked legitimate until they zoomed in. Beneath the laminate, the barcode had been blacked out with a marker. She never entered the room, just stood at the window, and in her right hand she held something unmistakable, the crown. Then she turned and walked out of frame. Back at the field house, the secondary chamber Naomi had discovered earlier continued to yield evidence. They'd found remnants of burned audio tape, melted crayons arranged in ritual patterns, and, most disturbing, child-sized mannequins dressed in red and white jackets arranged in a new circle. 7 total, each with a note pinned to the chest. Each note began with the same 2 words, "I remember." Grant stood beside Naomi in the dim light. "Why 7? Naomi's voice was hollow. "Because Dylan's the 8th, and he's still alive." They scanned the circle. One mannequin was taller than the others, its face painted with thick black streaks, tears, or perhaps something else. A child's attempt at transformation, or warning. The note on its chest simply read, "He's next." Elsewhere, Megan stood inside the old motel room, candlelight flickering across her pale face. Jeremy Cross was pacing, agitated, sleepless. "I didn't sign up for this," he said. "I thought we were done." Megan turned slowly. "You never finished your session, Jeremy. You watched from the stands while your cousins were taken. You lied to the police. You buried the truth. You belong in the circle." He laughed nervously. "It was 30 years ago. We were kids." "So were we," Megan snapped. "And they buried us alive in that place while the world moved on." Jeremy fell silent. She picked up the crown and walked toward him. "You want forgiveness?" she whispered. "Then kneel." He hesitated, then dropped to his knees. That evening, Naomi returned to Elise Foss's house. Harper's mother had found another notebook. "I couldn't look at it until now," she said, hands trembling. The notebook was child-sized, spiral-bound. A Lisa Frank sticker on the cover, faded from time. Inside were pages of script practice, math homework, and then, abruptly, entries that darkened in tone. Micah doesn't sleep anymore. They say Megan is special. The watcher kissed her forehead. We are all supposed to bleed for the circle. But I'm scared because I like it when he touches my hair. I don't want to like it. Am I bad? Naomi's throat tightened. She turned to the final page. It was just one sentence, written over and over. The crown doesn't feel pain anymore. Later that night, Dylan woke suddenly and asked for Naomi. She came at once. He was sitting upright, eyes clear for the first time in days. She's going to finish it, he said. That's why she came. Finish what? He stared at her. Session 14. Naomi leaned in. What is Session 14, Dylan? His eyes watered. They told us it was the final lesson, when we wouldn't be children anymore, when the circle would take one of us and send them. Send them where? He shook his head. Not where, into. Naomi blinked. Into what? Dylan's voice dropped to a whisper. You. At that moment, in the East Field House, officers discovered something buried beneath the replica chamber. A crate, sealed with wax and twine. Inside, 8 tape reels labeled only with numbers. One reel was already missing. Number 14, October 21st, 2024. Location, Echo Valley Police Department. Evidence viewing room. The room had no windows. Naomi Vega stood in silence, arms crossed, as CSU prepared to play one of the newly discovered tape reels. Reel 6, one of 7 recovered from beneath the field house. Reel 14, the last and most recent, was still missing. We digitized the audio, tech specialist Marcus Young said, adjusting a dial. No known broadcast frequency. The tape's 30 minutes long. Naomi nodded. Play it. The audio began with silence, then a soft chime, then children. We belong to the circle. We offer our words. We offer our thoughts. Their voices were calm, flat, controlled. Then another voice entered. Older, male, not masked by distortion, but clear and direct. Session 6. Preparation of the flesh. Today we honor the gift. We draw the mark. We show trust. A child cried out, then silence, then a soft, wet sound. Peeling, cutting. Then, do not scream. Screaming is regression. Naomi stood motionless as her pulse hammered in her ears. The tape continued with rhythmic chanting, and at the very end a new sound, one not heard on previous tapes. A second voice, younger, female, clear. I will wear the crown so they don't have to. Naomi's voice cracked. That's Megan. Across town, Megan sat on the edge of Jeremy's motel bed, the crown in her lap. Her fingers had begun to bleed where the hooks pressed into her palms. She didn't care. Jeremy sat in the corner, shaking. Why are you doing this? He asked. Why bring it all back? Megan's eyes were dark pools of silence. Because they forgot us. No one forgot. You were on every milk carton in the state. She turned toward him slowly. No, she said. They forgot what was done. They forgot that people cheered while we were under their feet. That our screams echoed beneath their goddamn football games. Jeremy's voice dropped to a whisper. I was just a kid. You were outside, she said. You had choices. She stood, placing the crown gently into a padded box. Then, from her coat, she pulled out Ryle 14. It's time they all hear it. Meanwhile, back at the station, Dylan Reed began drawing. No one asked him to. He simply took a pen from the tray and began filling a blank notepad with increasingly complex symbols. Circles, spirals, eyes, teeth, then faces, each child's face, drawn from memory, 7 of them. In the center, one figure stood taller, masked, crowned. Beneath the drawing, he wrote in block letters, Session 14 starts at nightfall. Naomi studied the sketch. He's not just remembering, she said. He's reliving it. Grant approached from the hallway. We got a report from the emergency dispatch center. Someone left a tape recorder at the courthouse steps. No return address, just a note. Play me before it's too late. Naomi's blood chilled. She's making this public. That night, Megan stood alone on the 50-yard line of Echo Valley's football field. It was empty, silent, no bleachers, no announcer. Just a breeze whistling through the chain-link fence. She opened the padded case and placed the reel-to-reel recorder down on the turf. The reel inside was marked with one word, Ascend. She pressed play. The tape clicked, then spun, then began to hum. This is the final session. You may feel pain. That is the cost of remembering. The voice was her own, aged by years of isolation, but calm, clear. We buried what they did to us. We obeyed. We trusted. We were broken. Now you will remember with us. Session 14 begins. Across Echo Valley, radios crackled to life. A strange signal interrupted evening broadcasts. Police scanners picked it up. Baby monitors, old radios in garages, even a few smartphones. The recording bled into the town like an infection, and it played all night. Children's voices chanting, a crown clinking against stone, a girl's whisper promising, this time, the circle closes. Back at the station, Naomi listened in horror. This isn't a warning, she said aloud. It's a summons. Grant looked at her, confused. Summons for who? Naomi looked up at the map of Echo Valley High, eyes locking onto the East Fieldhouse. For everyone who watched and said nothing. October 22nd, 2024. Location, Echo Valley High, East Fieldhouse. Dawn. The sun hadn't yet crested the tree line when Naomi Vega arrived at the fieldhouse. The ground was wet with morning dew, and her boots left tracks in the grass as she crossed the line where the bleachers had once stood. The structure had been cordoned off for weeks now, fenced and guarded, but overnight, something had changed. The lock on the outer gate was cut clean. No signs of struggle, no forced entry, just a single red ribbon, tied to the chain link with a note pinned beneath it. Come down and see what you buried. Naomi's jaw clenched. She's down there. Inside, the air was colder. Grant arrived moments later with 2 federal agents, all geared for descent. The shaft under the fieldhouse had been expanded. Someone had reinforced the rope system and cleared the path. Lanterns now flickered at 20-foot intervals down the tunnel. A trail had been made for them. They descended slowly, carefully. 50 feet down, they reached the floor of the sanctum. But this time, the chamber had changed. The circle was complete. 8 child-sized chairs, 1 adult-sized, all arranged around the cracked stone altar, now draped in red cloth. And on it, laid gently, as if offered, was the crown. Still blood-stained, still hooked. Naomi approached with care. She could feel something hum in the room, not electrical, not seismic. Memory. It clung to the walls like mold. On each of the 8 chairs sat a Polaroid photo, one for each missing child. Some smiling, some blank-faced, all recent. But one photo was different. Megan, her eyes staring directly into the camera, and scrawled across her image in ink, not lost, reborn. Meanwhile, Megan stood in the bowels of the school's defunct boiler room, once sealed behind a false wall. It was her final hiding place. The tapes had been distributed. The broadcast had reached every corner of the town. All that remained was her last act. She turned toward Jeremy Cross, now zip-tied to an old desk chair, trembling. I tried to tell them, she said. In my own way. I left trails, letters, memories. They just wanted it to go away. Jeremy's voice cracked. You could have left it alone. She stepped closer. I was left alone, she said. For 30 years. He looked at her, eyes wet with dread. What happens now? She smiled. Session 14 concludes. Then she turned off the light. Back in the sanctum, Naomi studied a new symbol carved into the altar, one not found on any previous walls. a triangle. Inside it, 3 eyes, a bleeding crown above. Marcus radioed in from upstairs. "You're not going to like this," he said. "Someone accessed the school's PA system remotely just after midnight, played the entire tape. The whole town heard it." Grant looked at Naomi. "She's turning the town into a witness." "No," Naomi said, realization sinking in. "She's turning it into a circle." At 10:07 a.m., a janitor found Jeremy Cross, duct taped to the inside of the principal's office, alive but disoriented. A note taped to his chest. "One of you watched. Now you'll remember too." He was missing 3 teeth. By afternoon, Elise Voss arrived at the station holding something wrapped in a dish towel. Naomi unwrapped it carefully. A child's drawing, hidden in a floor vent in Harper's old bedroom. It was dated 1994, but the image was new. The drawing showed a football field. Beneath it, rows of children standing in perfect formation. Red jackets, blank faces, crown at the center. And one girl, larger than the rest. Hands outstretched, caption written in Harper's handwriting, "She said we were waiting, but now we're awake." Naomi sat back, heart racing. "She's not trying to escape," she whispered. "She's building a church." At sunset, Naomi returned to the sanctum. It was empty now. Photos gone, crown missing. But something new had been left in its place, etched into the concrete near the altar. A single phrase in capital letters. "Session 15 begins when the bleachers are full." October 22nd, 2024. Evening location, Echo Valley High, football field. They came in silence. At first, it was just a few. Parents of the missing, former classmates, janitors who worked the 1994 homecoming game, one of the original coaches, now in his 70s, leaning on a cane. Then came the rest. Hundreds of townspeople, some invited, some compelled, some who claimed they didn't even know why they showed up. They filled the bleachers under a sky that burned gold and orange. None of them spoke. It was as if the town itself remembered. As if, after 30 years of denial and revision, Echo Valley had been called to account. Naomi Vega stood alone on the 50-yard line, watching it happen. She had no speech prepared, no sirens, no press, no barricades. She understood now. This wasn't an event. It was a reckoning, and somewhere in the crowd, she could feel her. Megan. At 7:44 p.m., every stadium light turned on at once, though no one touched a switch. The field glowed, the stands were completely full, and then, one by one, 8 children stepped out from the tunnel at the far end of the field. No one moved. They were dressed in pristine red and white windbreakers, hair neatly combed, faces blank. Not ghosts, not hallucinations, real, or close enough to it. They stopped at midfield, forming a perfect circle. Then the 9th figure emerged. A girl, now a woman, crown in hand. She stepped into the center of the circle, Megan McElroy. Her expression was serene, her eyes rimmed in charcoal, mouth expressionless. She raised the crown slowly and placed it on her head, and the children began to chant. "We remember. We return. We are the circle. We are the crown." The sound echoed like a drumbeat against the trees. Naomi stepped forward. "Megan," she called. The woman turned toward her, and for the first time, something flickered behind her eyes. Recognition, sadness, and a strange kind of peace. Naomi moved closer. "You don't have to do this. You don't have to finish it." Megan's voice was soft, barely audible. "I already did." At that moment, the speakers across the stadium crackled to life. But instead of the session tapes, a new voice spoke. A child's voice. Harper Voss. "He made us take turns. We weren't allowed to cry, but Megan did. And he made her wear it longer. Megan always took the pain for us. We never forgot." Now you won't either. Up in the stands, the townspeople listened, motionless. Some began to cry, some bowed their heads, and some, those who remembered the 1994 game most vividly, simply stood up and walked down to the field. They joined the circle, one by one. No force, no command, just memory. Later, as the fog rolled in across the grass, Naomi stood at the edge of the formation. She didn't join, but she watched. Megan removed the crown, laid it at Naomi's feet, and without another word, turned and disappeared into the mist with the others, child and adult alike, walking into the tunnel beneath the east bleachers. By the time Naomi reached it, they were gone. No trace, no heat signatures, no footprints. Just a final message, carved freshly into the tunnel wall. The circle closes. The crown rests. Echo Valley remembers. November 1st, 2024 occasion, Echo Valley, Pennsylvania. The tunnel was filled in. Concrete poured, fieldhouse condemned. The school board voted unanimously to build a memorial garden where the bleachers once stood. Naomi still didn't know where Megan went. No one did. But the tapes stopped circulating. The voices stopped whispering. The dreams that had haunted Dylan Reed, Harper Voss's mother, and dozens of others finally ceased. And yet, sometimes when the wind shifts across the field at night, a faint sound returns. Children laughing, a crown clinking against concrete, and a whisper in the dark. We are still waiting. October 22nd, 2024. Evening location, Echo Valley High, football field. They came in silence. At first, it was just a few. Parents of the missing, former classmates, janitors who worked the 1994 homecoming game. One of the original coaches, now in his 70s, leaning on a cane. Then came the rest. Hundreds of townspeople. Some invited, some compelled. Some who claimed they didn't even know why they showed up. They filled the bleachers under a sky that burned gold and orange. None of them spoke. It was as if the town itself remembered, as if, after 30 years of denial and revision, Echo Valley had been called to account. Naomi Vega stood alone on the 50-yard line, watching it happen. She had no speech prepared, no sirens, no press, no barricades. She understood now, this wasn't an event. It was a reckoning. And somewhere in the crowd, she could feel her, Megan. At 7:44 p.m., every stadium light turned on at once, though no one touched a switch. The field glowed. The stands were completely full. And then, one by one, 8 children stepped out from the tunnel at the far end of the field. No one moved. They were dressed in pristine red and white windbreakers, hair neatly combed, faces blank. Not ghosts, not hallucinations. Real, or close enough to it. They stopped at midfield, forming a perfect circle. Then the 9th figure emerged. A girl, now a woman, crown in hand. She stepped into the center of the circle, Megan McElroy. Her expression was serene, her eyes rimmed in charcoal, mouth expressionless. She raised the crown slowly and placed it on her head, and the children began to chant. We remember. We return. We are the circle. We are the crown. The sound echoed like a drumbeat against the trees. Naomi stepped forward. Megan, she called. The woman turned toward her, and for the first time, something flickered behind her eyes. Recognition, sadness, and a strange kind of peace. Naomi moved closer. You don't have to do this. You don't have to finish it. Megan's voice was soft, barely audible. I already did. At that moment, the speakers across the stadium crackled to life. But instead of the session tapes, a new voice spoke. A child's voice. Harper Voss. He made us take turns. We weren't allowed to cry, but Megan did, and he made her wear it longer. Megan always took the pain for us. We never forgot. Now you won't either. Up in the stands, the townspeople listened, motionless. Some began to cry. Some bowed their heads. And some, those who remembered the 1994 game most vividly, simply stood up and walked down to the field. They joined the circle. One by one. No force, no command. Just memory. Later, as the fog rolled in across the grass, Naomi stood at the edge of the formation. She didn't join, but she watched. Megan removed the crown, laid it at Naomi's feet, and without another word, turned and disappeared into the mist with the others, child and adult alike, walking into the tunnel beneath the east bleachers. By the time Naomi reached it, they were gone. No trace, no heat signatures, no footprints. Just a final message, carved freshly into the tunnel wall. The circle closes. The crown rests. Echo Valley remembers. November 1st, 2024, arrived at Echo Valley, Pennsylvania. The tunnel was filled in, concrete poured, fieldhouse condemned. The school board voted unanimously to build a memorial garden where the bleachers once stood. Naomi still didn't know where Megan went. No one did. But the tapes stopped circulating. The voices stopped whispering. The dreams that had haunted Dylan Reed, Harper Voss's mother, and dozens of others finally ceased. And yet, sometimes when the wind shifts across the field at night, a faint sound returns. Children laughing, a crown clinking against concrete, and a whisper in the dark. We are still waiting.